It's the 14th episode of the WWJ Industry Connected Podcast, a monthly podcast devoted to the groundwater industry produced by the National Groundwater Association. I'm your host, Mike Price, and today we're joined by Will Keyes, CWD of Terra Sonic International. We discuss the sonic drilling method, why its use is increasing in the geothermal and water well markets, and more. Welcome, Will. Thanks for joining the podcast today. Can you introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me. My name's Will Keyes. I'm with Terra Sonic International. I'm one of the business development managers. I've been here for a little over a year, but my background is very deep in sonic technology and sonic drilling. I've been around these particular units in sonic drilling for almost 15 years now. So I met Mike before I worked at Terra Sonic, but I was still talking about sonic drilling. So he knows me from that background.
Yeah. And you've been a great industry friend and presented at our Groundwater Week last few years. And coming off Groundwater Week 2024, where you presented on Sonic, you were pretty busy ending the year, and now into 2025. Are you guys pretty busy to start with?
Yeah, it's been a very busy year. You're absolutely correct. The end of the year was very exciting. We had a lot of pieces moving around, and it's continued into 2025. And we're excited to see the industry grow in every aspect of drilling.
That's great to hear. And can you just, tell us too what a typical day looks like for you?
So typically I get started pretty early to plan out my day. I guard my time because that's the most elusive thing to capture these days. So I map out my day almost in 15-minute increments and schedule out where I'm going to be. I've got a lot of people to talk to and a lot of customers to follow up with in a given time. And then, we take in calls, take in orders. We've just opened a new facility on the West Coast and one on the East Coast. So we are working with local customers to get them supplied and transitioned from pulling from the main distribution center in Ohio to the regional facilities. So that transition has been helpful for our customers, but it keeps everybody busy and on their toes day in and day out operating.
Sure. Well, that sounds great to hear. So for viewers who aren't familiar with Sonic, let's start there. Can you give a basic overview of the method that's not new, but might be new for some folks who aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, so with Sonic, like any drilling method, you've got rotation. Unlike conventional methods, augers, mud rotary, or air, instead of circulating a fluid, you're using an oscillator in the head that operates at 50,000 pounds of force at 150 hertz. And so what that does is it creates a resonant frequency, and you can control that from the controls of the rig to basically vibrate, for lack of a better term, oscillate through different types of materials to cut it and shear it, break it, penetrate it, whatever the case may be, depending on the formation itself. In sands, it kind of suspends the sand particles, holds them vibrating. And then in clays, it does more of a shearing of the clay structures. And then in a bedrock, it percussively penetrates, similar to an air hammer, only oscillating at 15,000 RPMs per minute.
Really cool. Yeah. So formation-wise, bedrock, you get that question a lot, how it performs in certain formations. And let's start with bedrock.
Yeah, we always get that question. How does Sonic perform in bedrock? We like to preface that with not all bedrock is created equal. There's obviously a Mohs hardness scale, and you've got very hard bedrock and you've got softer bedrocks. And we've been experimenting with some of the more hard bedrock here, and we've seen some very exciting developments. Really, we started out thinking maybe it wasn't suited for Sonic. Sonic wasn't suited for a certain type of bedrock, but our R&D department does a great job of breaking the norms and coming up with new solutions to tackle it. So with some combination of adding air, mud, fluids to larger sonic bits and bigger carbides, we've been able to effectively tackle tougher and harder bedrocks than sonic drilling is known to do in the past. So that's been really exciting for us. And obviously, the softer bedrocks, the shales, the limestones, those have always been relatively easy for sonic drilling.
Mm-hmm. And how long has Sonic been in existence for the industry?
Well, for I guess widely accepted around the 90s, early 90s, but it's been around for since the 60s and earlier than that, really. But for the drilling industry, and what we know as the drilling industry, the late 80s, early 90s, and then it really took off in the environmental and oil exploration fields.
Gotcha. So, like you mentioned, drilling fluids are allowable when using the method. So, can you get into detail on how that works with the Sonic method?
Sure. So with sonic, typically the inner barrel is a core barrel. So if you're in a soft formation, you can effectively push a straw, if you will, or a core barrel into the material and then pull it back out, and that's your sample. When you get into the harder formations or a tougher formation with boulders and cobbles, and you need to help suspend or lubricate the bit face, we prefer to run a polymer versus a bentonite-based mud. A polymer mixes up better, and it doesn't, since we use a triplex pump, it seems to penetrate the cylinders through the pistons of the triplex pump better than a bentonite makes it through there. When if you wanted to opt for a standard Moino pump or another progressive cavity pump or a peristaltic pump, then bentonite clays are fine. You want to avoid that in the triplex pump if you can.
Okay. And then getting to the drill bit, the core drill bit, the core barrel drill bit, can you give us a primer on that, on the different types of bits?
Yeah, so there's several different types of bits with anything. What we standard use is a 4 3/4 inch core barrel bit, and that bit is basically the same diameter and the same thread pattern as the drill core barrel or drill steel, except it's got carbides embedded, and so you've got your inner carbide buttons, and then you've got your gauge buttons just like you would on an air hammer, except instead of it being a closed faced bit, it's an open faced bit, and you're only cutting the outside part of the material that you're cutting, allowing the rest of the cuttings to come up inside the core barrel. Now, obviously, that's the most common bit that is used with sonic drilling. We do make a full face bit that's ported for washing, just kind of washing a hole in the ground if you didn't need to sample it.
So, you want to talk geothermal?
Yeah, doesn't everybody?
Yeah, there were more geo rigs on the show floor at Groundwater Week 2024 than in years past. So it's great to see. So yeah, what's the geo market look like for Sonic?
So for Sonic, it's really exciting to see a technology that wasn't historically used for geothermal being brought into the market. What we saw initially was that some of the rates weren't competitive with sonic drilling rates, so folks stuck with conventional methods, air rotary and mud rotary. And as the sites became more challenging and the footage rates continued to rise due to demand in the industry, they started to align more with sonic drilling footage rates, which pulled sonic into the market for geothermal. Well, where it excelled really was in those formations, karst formations, boulders, cobbles that may typically, fight a mud rotary hole, and you couldn't drill it with air hammer. So being able to advance casing to keep the hole open, and then remove the casing and reuse the casing is really one of the biggest benefits to sonic. So once you move into the area where you've got a set casing, obviously that casing has to be grouted. The hole has to be reamed out, a bigger hole, and then you're installing your casing. You've got your time to grout the casing. Then you go back to drilling, and let's say you've grouted your casing into bedrock and you drill 100 feet and then you flood your hammer out. Well, what do you do there? Now you've got to have a bigger air compressor. Or with Sonic, you can advance casing down into that fracture and continue to drill either with air or with the Sonic percussive method to penetrate that material. So it's really worked in the most challenging scenarios. And a lot of people like it for first coming into the market because it's almost like an insurance policy. Your hole's cased off. You don't have to worry about fighting it. It may be you're new to the industry and you haven't had a lot of experience mixing muds or worrying about keeping a hole open. You leave the casing in the ground, the hole stays open. You can get your loop reel in place, put your loop in, grout it, pull the casing when you're done. And the fact that you pulled the casing and you've cleaned it and now you can reuse the casing, now you're starting to get ahead of where you were with leaving the casing in the ground and grouting it in the first place.
Yeah, that is, so it's an all-in-one efficiency. It sounds like the precision of the borehole plumbness. Can you speak to what Terra Sonic's been studying with the gyro survey results?
Sure. Yeah. So I sent you over the gyro survey we did at Oxford, Ohio I guess it was 2 summers ago now. And one of the things that we had noticed when we were converting some of our buildings over to geothermal was that the mud rotary drillers every now and then would accidentally drill back into one of their own loops. So we knew Sonic was straight just by the nature of the small annular space. So we did a study. We drilled an 825-foot hole, and we noticed that we went back and we put measuring instrumentation down the hole, and we realized that there was less than 1% deviation on an 800-foot hole. So what that does, that's about roughly 16 feet. But if you're familiar with geothermal, most of those loops are spread on a 20-foot field for optimal thermal conduction. So we learned that the chances of us drilling back into our own loop and damaging the work that we've already done was decreased, which again goes back to that insurance policy, knowing that you're putting the loop where it needs to be and it's ending up where it is supposed to be. We call that Sonic straight. And really, there's no other method that can guarantee that accuracy and that reliability of deviation. And as we've talked up with our cohorts up in New York and Chicago, once you get onto those properties that are the size of a postage stamp, you get up on those property markers and you're drilling and you start to deviate. They talk about, are you still on the property? Worse yet, have you drilled into something on somebody else's property? And then, from there, it's a litany of issues. So understanding where your borehole is and the straightness of it has been one of the benefits that our customers in the geothermal market have been able to rely on.
That makes total sense. Yeah. Imagine the job sites are only going to get smaller and smaller as geo takes off.
Yeah, so with those bigger air rotary rigs of the past, they're on those 52,000 plus chassis. They just can't get into those back areas. And then some of the larger geothermal rigs, even with the 20-foot stroke on them, end up being 30, 40 feet long. And maneuvering these small Sonic rigs, these compact crawlers into people's backyards and having the low ground pressure, the ability to get in and out of those tight areas really plays into the benefit of Sonic's compact footprint. So that's another benefit that we see, especially in those tight areas, New York State, Chicago, the Midwest. It's added to the cleanliness and production of the job site for sure.
So yeah, with geothermal really hitting its stride, I take it that you're seeing a lot more interest in the sonic method for geothermal now and moving forward throughout the year.
Yep, absolutely. It's been a wild transition to see how many people are changing over to Sonic for geothermal. One thing I wanted to touch on is we've kind of coined it SPM, which is Sonic Percussive Method. But what we found is, in a lot of cases, the Sonic Percussive Method for geothermal is ideal for penetrating tighter, harder formations that a roller cone or a PDC bit might have issues in. The ability to oscillate and break up that material so much faster has really shed a light on Sonic in the geothermal market. And we've done a lot of research, not just in Ohio, but on the West Coast now. We opened our office there earlier this year, and they've done some geothermal projects with some of their customers over there. And being able to show and highlight a particular method with sonic drilling in the geothermal market space has really helped folks shed a light on it, I would say, or maybe the term is open their eyes to sonic drilling, really, where they thought it was for maybe one particular method, but now they see that it can be used and utilized for other things that, we're all putting a hole in the ground, but the goal and the game in geothermal is who's putting the hole in the ground the fastest.
Yep. And can you speak to companies transitioning to either new folks new to the industry or companies transitioning to Sonic, what that leveling up in knowledge and operating a Sonic rig looks like?
Yeah, it's great for our existing customer base to use their Sonic rigs for geothermal because they already understand the methodology and the optimization of the drill rig. So that part, we do a couple of things to upfit the rig for production purposes, but those folks are primed to move into that marketplace faster than I would say a new customer who wanted to take it on. However, with our training program and our R&D programs and converting our own buildings over to geothermal because we believe in it, not just because, we want to do it, but we actually believe that it is the right thing to do and so much more efficient. We're always doing R&D in that market. So, yeah, it's been interesting to see the customers shift over and adapt to new methodologies. Obviously, they already understand how to run the controls and maintain the equipment. Now they're just making a hole in the ground for something different than they were before.
All right, let's pivot to the water well market now. What's Sonic bring to the table for the water well market?
So the water well market is also booming in my area. I'm based in the Southeast, and we have a backlog specifically North Carolina. Obviously, we had the hurricane last year that decimated the western North Carolina mountains. So we've got 10,000 water wells to be repaired just in western North Carolina alone. So every rig is busy right now, air rig, mud rig, everybody's busy trying to help those folks out and do their part. And what we've seen is that, in Sonic, people are able to move these rigs into these smaller, tighter, more difficult to access locations. And they're able to case off, in this case, boulder formations, tough mountain drilling, and get their casings grouted in. Obviously, we're able to drill a hole up to 12 inches. And sometimes if a customer wants it, they have custom made steel casings that they can make up to 16 inches with our equipment. So they're able to set and grout large diameter PVC casings. And where it was a tough process before, mud rotary, keeping a hole open in the mountain formation with boulders and cobbles can be a struggle. Sometimes the bigger equipment, the RC rigs, are very large and hard to get into those places. So Sonic's really been able to step in and and fill that void. And I think the ease of use of Sonic in the water well industry has helped spur that on. But we've had folks who, again, supply and demand economics 101. If the rate for water wells gets to match the footage rate of sonic drilling, then folks with sonic drills enter that market. So as those water well rates continue to decline, we've seen more and more of our customers get into that market. And I think it's just their comfort level with using a sonic rig to drill and set casing and then drill it out with SPM drilling has really driven sonic into the water well industry. Another thing that a lot of folks use a sonic rig for in the water well industry, especially here in the Southeast, is identifying aquifers that will produce the demand for, be it a house or a production facility. They'll conventionally sonic with the sonic core barrel, and because they're able to get 100% recovery, they're able to see all the different geological changes and strata and log that soil and figure out what where in that lithology is going to be the best place to place the screen for water well production.
And again, the straightness to the plumbness factor comes into play as well here. And the reduced risk of collapse. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, again, stable boreholes, straight boreholes, and then mitigating the risk of collapse or losing the hole before you're able to get your casing in and grouted in place. Again, it does all this with reduced waste and less cuttings than conventional mud rotary and air drilling. You don't need the big air compressor pulled around. You don't need to set up a solids control system, which all of those things expedite the drilling process, but also all of those things have an engine that require fuel and need to be maintained. So keeping those costs out also bring that footage rate up when you're drilling.
It's really cool to see how it's really Sonic's really hitting its stride now at a really important time in both the geo industry and the water well. To round out our conversation, are there any jobs in your memory where you thought maybe Sonic might not be able to do the job and it came through?
Yeah, so we like to call it the rescue mission, but we had a project where we had some air rigs on site and they struggled for a couple of days, and everybody said, well, the sonic rig's not going to do much for you when you get out there. But we did take it out there, and lo and behold, because we were able to set up so much quicker and we were able to advance casing whenever there was an issue. Well, what had happened was they were grouting in a casing, and they grouted in the casing. They thought they were in bedrock. They made it, a 20-foot pass. And then the bedrock broke up, became very fractured, and the hole caved in on top of the air hammer. So we were concerned, obviously, going into it. But the fact that we were able to case that off with sonic casing, then again advance a smaller diameter casing inside the large casing to seal off of that fracture in that bedrock, and ultimately TD that hole in a couple of days versus a couple of weeks. These were deep holes, 1,200-foot deep holes. It was good to see that. We weren't sure going into it what was going to happen, but ultimately coming out of that, everyone had a newfound respect for sonic technology. Now, this was many, many years ago. Since then, I'm sure other people have much better stories than I do, but that's just one of the ones that I've seen. And then obviously I was in dewatering for a good bit, and the standard method for dewatering is a large bucket auger with a large diameter water well inside of it for pulling as much water out of the aquifer as possible. Those rigs are very heavy and big, so we ultimately brought in a sonic rig, and what we found over time is that even with drilling smaller diameter wells, we could install 2 or 3 more of them quicker than the large diameter wells and get the same drawdown and keep the site dry just the same as the large diameter bucket auger wells.
And for the dewatering market, Sonic is still going strong there, I take it.
Yeah. Yep. Tried and true. We see more and more folks getting into it every day with Sonic.
Well, for those interested in seeing a drilling demo, what would you recommend people do?
So if you're interested in seeing a demo, we host demos quarterly in Ohio, North Carolina, and Oregon. But for those of you who think maybe you want to see it in your backyard because the soil conditions in one of those locations don't match what you have, we can bring it on the road, bring it to you, drill it in your front yard, drill it on a site that you're having trouble with. But we can talk about sonic drilling as much as we want, but until folks see it in real life, I think we've got work to do in spreading the sonic gospel throughout the industry.
Well, thanks for your time today, Will, and all the knowledge you shared. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. I appreciate it. Always happy to talk to the industry about sonic drilling.
Thanks for watching and listening to the WWJ Industry Connected Podcast. We'll be back next month with a brand new episode, so be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. We're on all the major platforms, so it'll be easy to find us. And visit waterwelljournal.com for the latest expert columns, feature articles, videos, and news covering the groundwater industry. So one more time for Will and I, thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.